This is You've Already Been Hacked, recorded on 25 October 2021. All right, this week we're a little delayed in getting the podcast together. My apologies to everyone for that. Not burnout, not laziness, not anything like that. I got inspired right about when it was recording time, and I decided to take a little bit of a dive down a rabbit hole instead of news of the week. Again, the rabbit hole I decided to dive down is something related to Twitch. Now, I'm sure anyone in the cybersecurity community or in geek culture or whatever part you may come from when you listen to this podcast is aware of the Twitch data leak. It was essentially their source code had been lifted through a misconfigured server. That's what caused the data leak. The data leak itself, however, is quite substantial. Minus a couple of unzipped directories, which I was not able to acquire successfully. I have the entirety of the data leak for research purposes only. Now, what we're going to go through in this podcast is just very cursory and a little bit high level. I'm not going to get into the absolute weeds of things for a couple of reasons. One, that would take very long, and as my listeners know, I try to keep this to be a very crisp podcast. However, if there is interest in a real heavy deep dive of things, leave some comments for me, and I'll consider it for a future recording. That's reason one. Reason two, and most likely and definitely for me, the more important reason is I have no interest in pontificating all of Twitch's information. While I do have what the source code is, and I do have what was in the data breach, as a cybersecurity professional, I have no real interest in harming Twitch through my podcast or any other company directly through my podcast. What I'm attempting to do in today's podcast is just to give a discussion over some of the things that, again, in a bit of a blurred sort of way, what I found through an early look into the data, and then why that data, even at this high level, is exceptionally problematic, the fact that it's gotten out there. And it may be stuff that many people aren't really considering, right? Most of what you've seen in the news to date has been, OMG, the source code for Twitch has leaked. What does this mean? And the other major thing is what the top streamers on Twitch are making, which is multi-millions of dollars. Okay, good for them. Congratulations, guys and gals. I'm happy for you. We all wish we could be making that much. Have at it, right? I don't fault them for that, and I think that's great, but that's not what we're going to talk about today, right? That stuff's been well covered. So, by my count, the Twitch source code leak is 175 plus gigabytes in size when decompressed, and is over 2,687,000 files and directories. It's a lot of information. A lot of this stuff, though, looks like it's very generic in nature. Templates and whatnot, not even templates for Twitch itself, but templates that come with some of the programs that they were using. Some of the more interesting items, though, that I found were an entire directory in this source code leak was dedicated to reversing tools. And it looks like within that directory, they had specific platforms or games that they were focusing on to do reversing with. They also had specific reversing tools found within the entirety of the directory. Found that interesting. Excuse me, although not necessarily unexpected, simply because as any good company, they're going to be looking at what their competitors are doing, what their partners might be doing, all that sort of stuff. But the fact that they were dedicating a substantial amount of space to it was interesting. I was not expecting to find that in the data set. Some of their templates, Twitch does have a sense of humor about them. Inside their own internal documentation, they have references to multiple books, to pop culture, to include Star Wars. They have an entire template based on the parable of Dark Plagueis the Wise, for those that remember The Revenge of the Sith, Episode 3 of Star Wars. They do have an internal Slack. They use Jenkins as part of their workflow. They keep their build history, and inside of the leak itself, there is at least through 2018, and this there could be more. As I said, I have not gone through the entirety of the data set; it's simply too large. There's at least 154 commits in their Edge graphic pipeline for production through 2018. They had individual members of the team have their full names as part of those commits. They do have some of their beta software in there, something related to the new program for their Twitch promotion booster. They have the usernames for the people that were working on that. They have router names and internal IP addresses as part of this. They have services and software for their alerting system, firewall whitelisting for IP addressing. They have network load balances addressers. All of this, and just in the little bit that I found, you could easily start to map out a network, which is exceedingly problematic for Twitch. Because if I was an attacker, I now am starting to build out where I can look and what I have to do to exploit their network or to break into it beyond just this one server that was compromised. I'm starting to build out my map. And as a good cybersecurity person, if you know where a network is and you know what devices are on it, you can start to ping against them, especially if they're at the edge, and you can figure out how to get through them because nothing has 100% certainty that it's going to be secure. Let's see. They have images, which I found very interesting, right? Images, literal, looks like, iPhone-like screen grabs of whiteboards, physical whiteboards, pen, ink, marker whiteboards, not digital, where they have what they're planning and what type of workflows they're looking at for specific items. They had authentication pathways. They had service locations that were in and not in AWS and where to find them. There was an entire directory on their IMA policy. They had password reset tools and information there. They had a link to their security COP, concept operations or their COP documentation, and multiple other links, URLs for URLs all over the place. Lots of them obviously going to AWS since Twitch is owned by Amazon. Some of the links and URLs worked. Some of them needed authentication. So just being able to try and get to them randomly from wherever you are, not likely to work. However, with the amount of data that is there, you might be able to find a path that could get you to this stuff. They had tool reviews for password tables that were external to the company. They had threat hunting information that they were using. They have a matching service on Twitch as well. If you're a user, very much like on any other video platform, they're going to make recommendations. I found it kind of funny. Again, pop culture being part of Twitch internal, and just in the way they think, they call it the Kevin Bacon service. So that's their service that looks up similar channels and displays that on their front end to their users. I just find some of that stuff very humorous. And the reason that I point some items like that out is it also gives you a mindset of what the software engineers are doing and thinking, right? You can start to build out what it is to expect in the environment to include, essentially here, calling it the Kevin Bacon service. That's a cover term, right? That's a project name. If you understand that they use pop cultural reference as part of their overall workflow, you can start to map that out as well, and you can start to have good guessing as to what you're likely to expect, because that's not very random, right? It's not a randomized couple, 2, 3, 5, 12 words that are a project name. It is something that is referenced to an area of pop culture which is researchable, which is problematic. They had direct links to all the ad files that are on the servers, and those direct links still work. So if you were a person that were interested in that sort of stuff, you could go through their CSV files and extract all of those relevant media files for yourself. I found that very interesting, that you could easily access that stuff without being behind any sort of protective layer or firewall or username and password. They had a list of unknown IP addresses. Now, I didn't look into the IP addresses too closely. Again, this was my first and initial review of the data leak, but those might be IP addresses that are paying against their services and systems that they are aware about and were subject to further research. It could have been for other reasons as well at this point, but it was a long list. Elsewhere, in other documentation, they had server names and IP addresses for those servers, the environments in which those servers were, whether they were pre-production, production, external, internal, things like that, and what service they were hosting. Again, this builds out my knowledge layer for what this network looks like and where I may want to go to find the things that are most important to them. Since I have their source code, which being an online platform, that's pretty damn well important, but what else and where else do I want to go? And with the information here, I'm starting to build out that knowledge base. They also, which I found quite interesting, had an entire listing inside their security folders of their Tor exit node listings. Now, why they might have the Tor exit nodes listed could be either for good reasons or for less than good reasons from where Twitch stands, right? Maybe they are attempting to block those nodes for within certain countries or for certain reasons or at the request of certain governments, whatever, but they know what they are. Or they are attempting to make sure that those nodes have access to the service, right? The fact that they had that full list and they knew what they were, interesting. They had a list of known malicious URLs, and this was, again, not unsurprisingly, very long. So they definitely were making a blacklist of sorts there. They had a couple of general customer service runbooks on how to go through queuing people for how they would help them or what the problem was or how to go through the problem, stuff like that. They had a few presentations a la PowerPoint, a couple of some Word documentation type stuff that I won't get into specifically. In one presentation, they had the presenter's name, his cell phone, his Twitch ID, his email, and his Skype if you wanted to contact him. They had workflows also there, internal, high-level workflows, so not a lot of specifics, but still documentation nonetheless, that also related to what they would do for inappropriate usernames and inappropriate content and how it would go through the system. A la, if it was this, it was almost like a question and answer workflow, right? So if it's this type of content, if it's this type of adult content, block it. If you're not sure, escalate it. If you escalate it, what's the next step? And then what's the next step? And what's the next step, right? Very interesting to follow through all that stuff that they just had that all in one spot. Certain directories were obviously directories of individual users. Other directories seemed to be just multi-share where they were doing the commits or had various C or C++ libraries that they were using. Just overall, an immense wealth of data and really a deep look behind the curtain of a company that has a definite, dare I say at a minimum, subculture, or at least such well-known brand naming that anyone, regardless of where you are, understands that they are a major video platform. So, what is the problem with all this being out there? Except that bad guys now have the information. Well, one, not only do bad guys have the information, and as I said, can start creating the network map of literal, logical, and physical devices, and build out a knowledge base of where to go and what exists and where it exists, whether that be logically or physically, to either essentially do nefarious things. But now also their competitors in the space can reverse engineer essentially the entire platform. that in itself is also exceptionally problematic. And I would say just by the size of this particular event, while not the largest thing that's ever been out there, I don't know that Twitch or any company, right? Pick your company to divorce. I'm sorry that it's Twitch in this respect. I don't know that any company is going to be able to make a hard pivot off of all of this technology, or that they would. Now they just have to live with how do they compete in an environment where a lot of their IP, a lot of their methodology, a lot of their thought process is exposed to their competitor base. It is a very interesting data set to go through. Now, one thing that I did not completely find in there, although based on previous reporting, there is definitely some of it, is direct usernames of, all Twitch users and who they are. I didn't find any of that sort of correlation. It may be there. Again, we're talking over 2 million files. I did not look through every one of those files. I wouldn't have a podcast ready forever if I did. We know that they were able to correlate user accounts for those top Twitch streamers and how much they make. So there's definitely some of that data in there. I did not look to see if there were password tables inside the security folders, although maybe there is. It's something to dig deeper with. A lot of different file types, a lot of different tools are going to be needed to really dig through all this. But if this is something you did, not to just do a ha-ha, I got in and here's everything I took, the fact that it's out there now, it can be researched, it can be scraped, it can be whatever anyone needs it to be because it's there. And that's the problem. So fingers crossed for Twitch. And let's hope they they stay out there. Whether or not you like them as a company is one thing, but the fact that they are in a competitive market space and they provide competition is the thing that matters most for that market space, right? That's the important part. Again, this was my cursory look at Twitch, and this was done over the course of just a couple of hours. Some simple searching for common file types and easily accessible items, not digging deep into the code. I'm sure there is a wealth more information inside of all of that. One last note, one last interesting thing I found in there is they had GIFs, animated GIFs or GIFs, depends on what you want to call it. I'm not going to get into that fight with everybody. They had multiple GIFs that were animated of screen captures. Now, either this was for documentation purposes, where someone did this purposefully so that they could provide this to a coworker to show them how to do a thing, or this is part of their internal security measures where this stuff gets captured for review later. I'm not sure at this point. I didn't dig deep enough to tell the difference, but the mere fact that it was there and there was a lot of them, again, another interesting find inside of this data set. If you're interested in hearing more about what's inside the Twitch source code leak, again, leave comments, leave your suggestions, leave your questions, and I will dig through and see what's there. However, again, I have no interest in providing exact detailed information about what is in the data set. I will not give out usernames, IPs, or anything of that sort of nature in a direct way. I have no interest in doing that for or to hurt Twitch, right? As a cybersecurity person and as a cybersecurity instructor, my interest here is discussing the types of information that was in there and the potential problems from that exposure. That's all for this week. I'm your professor of cyber risk, and we'll talk again soon. If you like this podcast, share it with your colleagues and friends. Your support is how we are able to continue to make this content. Thank you.